So, I have this brilliant idea for a deck. We play an offer you can't refuse. Force the runner to run into a tour guide, charge up chiefly, bomb them with meat damage, and then use archive memories to recur an offer you can't refuse to do it all over again. How do you make this a good deck? Well, cut all the chaff. Hi everyone, just to clarify from the intro, there'll be no chiefly, no tour guides, just offer you can't refuse rather from my hand. Why am I playing an offer you can't refuse in Architects of Tomorrow? Well, there are several reasons and I implore you to think of them. Think of why it's very synergistic in this deck that I'm playing, and I'll tell you at the end of this video. For now, we'll dive into the game as I mull over my mulligan decision. There's not much value in this opening hand. I really want to see early economy. This deck, just like Food Codes, is very reliant on campaign economy. So without an Eve or Adonis, I'm forced to mulligan this hand. And this is a much better hand. Eve campaign with Breaker Bay is super annoying for anyone that's not Wizard to trash, so that's definitely going to be my turn 1. This is what made Food Codes so powerful. For those of you who weren't around during the Food Codes era last year, basically what happens is, if you find a turn 1 Eve and Breaker Bay, you are good to go, because most runners, even the likes of Kate, which was the most powerful dominant runner back then, had no way to contest a turn 1 Eve Breaker Bay grid. And if you don't contest it on turn 1, they will almost certainly ice out on turn 2, which is exactly what I'm going to do. I couldn't ice it this turn, obviously because I needed to protect against account siphon, so one click had to go to ice on HQ, but you can be sure that I'm going to put ice on the remote now. The question is which ice. Ravana makes the most sense here. Why? Because if I draw into an Eli, or any other Bioroid, I can stack it on top of the Ravana and provide a lot of protection for this remote. Not to mention that code gates tend to be the Achilles heel of criminals, high strength code gates for that matter. So Ravana is the prime choice, and yeah, most runners won't be very comfortable running the Eve in this position, especially not with my opponent's poor economy. For an Andromeda start, that is very poor. Only 6 credits to a name after, sure, they install an Earthrise, but that's very, very poor. No Termusion early on, no Desperado, that looks really bad. So I'm gonna abuse the fact that my opponent does not have money by putting out another naked Breaker Bay grid into Eve campaign. Again, sorry for the balked interface, the arrows are pointing to the right of the server that they're running. In this case, this will be R&D. But back to this game, I am fairly sure my opponent's not on bank job, because if they had bank job, they would have played it on turn 1. The fact that they did not clue me into the possibility of my opponent, the reduced possibility of my opponent having a bank job, so I'm not worried about opening a naked remote for my opponent. Notice that I also fire off Artichokes of Tomorrow's ability on after the Ichi pass, so as to res the Ravana on the remote. Now this Ravana won't actually do very much. Currently the only active subroutines are Treasure Program and Trace 1. I mostly res the Ravana here just to get the free res, the 4 credit, or in this case 3 credit discount. The Ravana won't do much, but I'm really not concerned with my opponent trashing the Eve campaign, especially not now, because firstly they're too poor to trash it, and secondly, I can always just slot another Adonis in the remote if I want to. So I'm very happy with showing the Ravana here, showing the weak Ravana. What I'm not happy with is my defense of HQ. I am very concerned that account siphon is a very huge possibility right now, and a smart runner would simply siphon blindly, because most of Architects of Tomatoes' eyes are Bioroids and hence clickable. You do not want them to click through your eyes and then perform an account siphon. That's the problem with playing things like strong identities like Stronger Together and AOT, because most of your deck will be Bioroids, so you're telegraphing that you have a lot of clickable eyes. This is a big problem against Siphon decks, so I needed to get double eyes on HQ ASAP, not only to defend against Siphon, but also to allow me to fire AOT's ability. You notice that after the R&D run, where my opponent stole the global food, I was able to fire AOT because it triggers on every Bioroid pass for the first during the turn. And I trigger it on the Ichi, the innermost Ichi on HQ. So there's still unrest eyes on HQ. My opponent cannot simply play account siphon and expect to get a successful siphon, but I can get the discount for resing the Ichi, and that's huge. The AOT triggers are adding up. Now, I'm starting to overdraw with Jackson. Once again, I'm very almost arrogant at this point with the naked assets. I have no respect for my opponent at all. I'm just leaving the naked Jackson out there. You can trash it if you want. I don't really care. I'm just going to leave it there. I more or less knew he was not going to run it because it was so poor. He only had 9 credits. So, conceding a Jackson was actually kind of a huge mistake because it allowed me to overdraw into what I was looking for next, an agenda. I found the Vitruvius. I've really set up my economy. I have a good amount of ice going. All I need now is agendas, and agenda I found. Next turn, I'm going to biotic the Vitruvius out. So, more on my deck. Even though I'm running a Glacier style deck with lots of chunky ice and lots of campaigns, I'm running the full suite of campaigns here. This is primarily actually a fast advanced deck. My main win condition is biotic labor into 3/2 agendas. It is the most natural win condition for HB, considering that it's the only faction with 6 pure 3/2 agendas. That doesn't include merger, of course. Meanwhile, my opponent finally finds some room to set up, but it's still very poor. Starting the turn with 4 credits, they can't afford to run any centrals at all. You have to wait until the daily casts tick down. And they are slowly getting cards with John Masnori and Desperado, so that's pretty good value. I am definitely looking to shut that off at some point in the future, but I need to draw more ice first. I would like to defend both Archives and the Naked Remote at the same time, because if I defend Archives with this very precious Fairchild 3, that's my remote left open. My opponent can still Desperado John Masnori into the Eve remote, and perhaps even get a Temujin off it. So another important thing about my play that you should notice is that I always strive to hold one piece of ice in my hand at the very least, to defend against Temujin. If the runner at any point slaps on the Temujin, I need to be able to defend it immediately, defend the Temujin server with a piece of ice, tax them out, make sure that the Temujin is a lot less worth it. Now I overwrote an Eve campaign with 2 credits on it to install an Adonis campaign. This was bait, and my opponent fell for it, running last click, realizing they can't get past the Eli, and taking a tag from John Masnori. This is a big mistake. I'm not sure what my opponent was thinking here, but they clearly couldn't get past it. After paying for the paperclip, they didn't have enough credits to get through it, and they couldn't click through the ice. So on an unsuccessful run, John Masnori triggers to give the runner a tag, and now I'm deliberating over my decisions here. What do I trash? I wanted to play the hedge fund from my hand, but in the end I decided to trash all 3 resources because I have very good reasons to trash all 3 of them. Usually you let the daily cast go because it only has 4 credits on it, but my opponent being so poor right now with not even a Temujin, they will be completely crippled if they are shut off from the daily cast. So I killed all 3 resources. My opponent found Crash Space, but that's not going to do much in this matchup. So my opponent's in a very bad place, not only having to use Career Fair for the Crash Space, but also having to clear the tag. So they are in a very bad place right now, and I can continue taking advantage of my tempo lead to further solidify my centrals. HQ is now triple iced, and now that I found enough ice, every single server is going to be locked shut. No free Temujins for my opponent. Temujin is very high stakes at this point. If there's an open server at any point, my opponent can gain 11 credits in a turn with Desperado in conjunction with Temujin, and we don't want that. Now, I'm drawing a lot of campaigns right now, so I'm happy to let the money flow through my double remotes. But I'm not drawing the correct agendas, and I don't seem to be drawing biotic labor either. So I do need to pump out this global food at some point, which is why I've put the Vikram 1.0 on server 1, instead of holding it in my hand, as I would like to save it for defending any server that's under siege. I need to put it on the remote right now because I plan to score the food next turn. Now, I am fully aware that a Vikram, Eli, Ravana server is not going to keep my opponent out, but the intention here is to drag them through the server, force them to lose a lot of tempo, force them to use their KD Jones, because KD Jones is Glacier's deck's worst enemy. If you were around, once again, when Food Courts was rife, KD Jones is the saving grace. A turn 1 KD Jones often turns the tables on Glacier decks simply because it does so much work back then when Temujin wasn't a thing. So yeah, KD is one of the best economy sources back in the day, and it still is pretty good right now. I need to force my opponent to unload the KD Jones so that they can't get big mileage, like 9 or 12 credits off of it. Unfortunately, my opponent didn't take the bait. They decided to set up instead. Unfortunately for my opponent, that is, You almost always have to contest global food if the corp is going for it, and the fact that my opponent did not do that is detrimental to them. Now I'm on match point, a biotic into Vitruvius that I have in my hand will immediately win me the game. My opponent finally finds a Temujin after digging through 2/3 of the deck, and thankfully installed the double mongoose in good time, because I had the trap set up, Vikram into Ichi. Without double sentry breaker, they will be forced to click through one of those ice. So my opponent is able to get through the server, pay through the server, but at what cost? These ice are super taxing. Mongoose is not the most efficient breaker. While it's good at breaking multiple subroutines, both these ice have three subroutines. So they still have to pay a good amount to break through it, not to mention the pumping of strength, making it almost not worth it. But at least my opponent finds a Vitruvius for the efforts. Now I win the game. Biotic into Vitruvius wins me the game. But here I was being really stupid. Didn't see that line of play. I don't know why I didn't see that line of play, honestly. I don't know. I think I was thinking of saving the Biotic for the next agenda, but I didn't realize that the Vitruvius would win me the game. Yeah, bad plays here. My opponent could easily run that remote and make the game a lot closer than it should have, but they couldn't because they ran out of credits after the R&D run, so I managed to exploit the scoring window to win the game. Alright, so I hope you've been thinking about the question, why an offer you can't refuse in AOT? Now I know that I didn't actually play this card, I didn't even draw it this game, but the theory still stands. Firstly, it synergizes with the ID ability itself. By playing this card, you will either get an agenda point or the runner's forced to run through your Bioroid Ice and triggering AOT. This is very important versus decks like Blackmail Valencia, like Dumble Fox with Cutlery. You want to be able to force the runner to run and activate your ability, and this card has that for you on a stick. You pay 4 to play this card, but you get your 4 credit investment back in the form of a refund by rezzing Ice. That's pretty cool, not to mention the ability to tax the runner out by forcing them to run through your ice, which I'll talk about later. But it does synergize with AOT nicely, and this is why I'm playing this deck in this ID as opposed to Engineering the Future. Another big reason is the HB Agenda Suite. Most runners will just give you the offer, they'll refuse the offer. But for HB, that gives HB a very big advantage. Most HB decks have no problem scoring 6 points. Biotic labor makes that pretty easy, coupled with all their 3-2 agendas. Getting the 7th point is the tricky part about playing HB. Either you have to play suboptimal agendas like Kronos Project or Domestic Sleepers, because HB does not have agenda gaining mechanisms in faction. They don't have clones are not people, they don't have public support. So being able to import an offer you can't refuse is a way to get that 7th agenda point and really punish the runner for refusing the offer. It synergizes best with HB's agenda suite. In fact, I think it's more suited to be played in HB than Jinteki when you consider the last point, which is that it synergizes with Bioroids so very well. Bioroids are by nature very taxing, high strength, lots of subroutines, and have very punishing subroutines. The runner can't let them fire. And most of them are not end the run. Outside of Eli, you're getting really horrible punishing subroutines like do 1 brain damage or end the run, trace 4 for a brain damage, trash a program. These are all subroutines that the runner has to break. By presenting them the offer, you're making it very difficult for them to continue. And this could very easily open a scoring window. If you bait them into R&D and they spend all their resources getting through your ice, you can then switch and bait, put an agenda in the remote, and then score that instead. This is a very good way to fork the runner, and I think an offer you can't refuse really shines in this regard. It's very unfortunate that it costs so much influence. 3 influence takes up a quarter of AOT's influence limit, which is a big problem because AOT is already starved for influence as it is. At the end of the day, it just might be better in ETF, but it's something worth considering nonetheless. Hope you found this interesting, and maybe you should try an offer you can't refuse in HB yourself. Who knows, it might work out very well. Thanks for watching a happy night running, I'll see you around.